There's a polite joke in there about you thinking that the reason the weather is like this, it's all because of you, okay? But I'm going to let you think that, okay? That's not a problem. Spend a little more money, and I will believe it myself, okay? First of all, I want to thank everybody. I want to thank all of you here and the role you're playing, because let me say one basic fact. You're going to get into a lot of details, a lot of discussion about higher education. We live in an era where you earn what you learn. That simple. And then everything from that principle flows. One fact, or two facts. City of Chicago in the last 12 months led the nation in job creation of any major city in the country. We also led the nation in the drop in unemployment last 12 months. University of Chicago study, so it's not just me. And it's not like the economics department of the UFC is looking to help a Democratic mayor, okay? Obviously, you understand what I'm saying. Now, we're not sitting on top of shale gas, and we're not next to Silicon Valley. But what we are sitting on, the average college education, four-year college education population in the country is 27%. In the city of Chicago, it's 34%. I'll take 34% college education, two of the greatest business schools, two of the greatest law schools, two national labs, two computer science schools within 100 miles of the city of Chicago and computer engineering schools on top of, not an adjustment to shale gas. You give me that higher education skilled workforce, you'll get 7 new corporate headquarters in less than a year, 33 companies to either expand or relocate to the city of Chicago, and you'll lead the country in job creation. What's true for Chicago can be true for the rest of the country. Because skilled workforce, educated workforce, at every level, you give companies the certainty from your community colleges to your Booth and Kellogg School of Business and everything between, and companies will flock there because a skilled workforce and the certainty of a skilled workforce that's skilled and ready to go, they will want to be a part of. Now, I'm also want to say something. Obviously, it's not just higher education. That's your primary concern. Just last week, we in the city of Chicago started our commitment to higher education with our down payment on pre-K education. While other states and other cities are cutting back because it's budgetary, 2 years ago, at the public school system, we added 6,000 kids to our kindergarten program, and we preserved it while we were taking $500 million out of the budget. In addition to that, just last week, we put 5,000 more kids into our full-day pre-K, have a citywide universal standard of higher education attainment. So that's where we're starting our commitment to higher education, making sure children of all types get access to pre-K education. Thank you. Second, there's one person obviously with a pre-K kid in here. Second, on a serious note, I want to say something. I'm going to introduce a good friend, somebody obviously who has deep roots into the education reform and goals for higher education, but somebody who I sat by the side of the president and has done two, I think, incredible things. One, revolutionize the notion of discussion of standards. We're no longer talking about it, but we're doing it as a country in our K through 12 effort. In that meeting we had with the president in Washington, in a side room during the transition, and came up with the notion of the race to the top. And states and cities across the country are now actually changing their programs, changing their school systems, re-engineering them, so standards, accountability from top to bottom are now a national goal. We're no longer talking about it, we're no longer studying it, we're no longer analyzing it. Cities and states across the country are adopting the standards to achieve what was set out in Race to the Top. And Arne has led that effort on behalf of the president, known to the rest of us as Secretary Duncan. Second is because of Arne's great work, and we talk about higher education. This is a battle, and I show the stripes of it from my time of both working for President Clinton in Congress and then for President Obama. But the notion that we used to have 6 million kids get Pell Grants and we took it to 9 million, a 50% increase while you're dealing with the tough economic times. That's 9 million kids every year getting Pell Grants to go to college. I mean, I thought when we had negotiated both the Hope Scholarship during the Balanced Budget Agreement, the Lifetime Learning Tax Credit, but 3 more million children, a 50% increase every year getting a Pell Grant because of the efforts of Secretary Duncan to make sure that that happens. Everything that you're trying to do back in your school systems, not just on the standards, which with resources come standards. Not resources over here and standards over there, they go together. That is an amazing accomplishment that our K through 12 are now raising standards and holding people accountable to achieve them for our students, but making sure that when kids want to go to college, we actually have the resources to help them. And as you see today, front page story in the Wall Street Journal above the fold is all about the cost of college now affecting middle class and upper middle class families and taking a bite out of their budget. Nothing is more important about dealing with the cost of higher education, the access to higher education, and making sure the one ladder for lower middle class to a middle class life is the access to higher education. And with the Pell Grants, we've given 3 more children every year, as far as the eye can see, access to that. With the person that's both done the race to the top and the Pell Grants, Secretary Arne-Duncan.
Thanks so much, Rahm. I'm thrilled to be here. George, thanks for the leadership. Paul, thank you so much for having me back. And just a couple things before I begin about Rahm. Rahm talked about the impact that Race to the Top has had, and I think it's been a pretty profound impact. But no one fought harder to get us those resources than Rahm. And all those changes, raising standards, turning around underperforming schools, taking on the tough work of teacher evaluations and principal evaluations, thinking differently about data systems. Folks didn't necessarily do that because they loved me or they loved the president. We had $4 billion that folks were very interested in. And without those resources, we would not have seen that kind of reform. So Rahm, thank you so much for being just a passionate advocate for it. What you may not know is that Rahm was actually trying to get us $15 billion. And it didn't quite work, but it's pretty extraordinary, the $4 billion we had. And without him, all that change that we've seen. What we're trying to do ultimately is get you guys out of the catch-up business, out of the remediation business. The only way we do that is to fix K-12. And that Race to the Top was a huge step in the right direction. We would never, ever have had those dollars without that. And subsequent to that, coming back here to Chicago, a couple phenomenal breakthroughs, and obviously I led the Chicago Public Schools here for 7.5 years, so this is where my heart is. He's put in place some really profound changes that I would have loved to have done, but we just didn't get done, weren't able to do it. We have the shortest school day historically here in the country. Our children need more time. Our streets aren't as safe as we want them to be. Many of our children live below the poverty line, need more academic work. Having the shortest school day of the year was no badge of honor. Now with his leadership, the day's been lengthened by over an hour across the system. Controversial, hard, I don't know how many hours you've spent on that, but that's the best thing we can do is give our children access to dance and drama and art and music and PE and a well-rounded education. So it's a huge step in the right direction. Again, dividends we won't see for a long, long time. But I'm just thrilled that happened. Again, I would love to have seen that happen years ago. We weren't able to get it done. He did. And then you heard from Chancellor Hyman earlier. She's an absolute dynamo. We have to fix K-12. But the reinvention of the community colleges here, we think, can have a profound impact on the national conversation. So Cheryl, thank you so much for your leadership. Please give the mayor another round of applause for his huge focus here. So I'm going to keep my remarks relatively short today and want to have a full and open conversation afterwards. I want to talk about a few things. Let me start by providing a preliminary assessment of state progress towards the bipartisan goal that Rahm talked about, of regaining America's place as a nation with the highest college attainment rate in the world. And everyone here knows that today we're 16th in the world. This is an insider audience. When I go out and talk to parents and young people and say, where do you think we are? They all say first or fourth or fifth. When I say 16th, there's usually this collective gasp. It's not something we should feel proud about. It's not something that's unacceptable. And I'm convinced we as a nation are paying a huge price economically for that. And after that, I want to highlight some of the troubling trends that are impeding our progress towards hitting the president's goal of, again, leading the world in college graduation rates by 2020. The common theme or takeaway messages here are really twofold. Boosting college access and completion is vital to the future economic prosperity and the civic vibrancy of your home states. And that's why accelerating college attainment is not just a policy and institutional concern of academia, it's really an urgent national mission. And secondly, and I can't stress this enough, that this is a national mission with a shared responsibility for all stakeholders. And as President Obama has said repeatedly, there's no better economic policy than one that produces more graduates. And that's why reforming education is the responsibility of every American, every parent, every teacher, every business leader, every public official, and every student. That theme of shared responsibility that the President articulated is very much in keeping with SHEEO's recent open letter to the President. And your open letter states, and I quote, that neither the states nor the federal government nor students and their families can reasonably be expected to bear the full burden of maintaining college access. All of us will need to make hard choices about priorities among the activities consuming scarce resources within and beyond education. I couldn't agree with that statement more. Students need to do their part by staying on track, by applying for federal and state and campus aid, by taking out loans they can actually afford, and by striving to earn their degrees and certificates on time. Colleges must do more to increase access, to tighten their belts, to employ technology more creatively, and to boost completion rates. And yes, states must do more to prioritize higher education funding. States can also do more to constrain growth in what families pay for college and incentivize innovation, encourage productivity, and accelerate completion. I know these tough choices are very much in the forefront of not only all of your minds, but of virtually every one of your governors across the country. I've not yet met a governor who did not wish to be remembered as the education governor. And I've yet to meet a governor who did not want America to be first again in educational attainment. State leaders like yourselves understand better than anyone that education is the engine of economic growth and the great equalizer in today's knowledge-based, globally competitive economy. So today we're going to provide each of you, and hopefully you already have it, and if not, you'll get it later today, with a snapshot of how your state is doing in meeting the goal of making America #1 again in college attainment. And that analysis suggests that our country and many of your states face some real challenges, some serious challenges in meeting the President's 2020 goal. The data that we're providing today show the current trend in educational attainment in each of your states and the increase in educational attainment needed to hit that 2020 mark. The charts for your states also show trends in state funding per full-time student between fiscal year 2008 and 2011, recent changes in the average net price at leading public universities, and changes in the median household income. There's a lot of important data to absorb in this preliminary analysis, and I'm obviously not going to go through all of it in detail, but I would like to point out a couple findings that I think stand out. First, the Great Recession clearly hampered most states' efforts to take big steps towards reaching that 2020 goal. Most states will need to substantially accelerate their production of undergraduate degrees during this decade if America is going to have the best educated, most competitive workforce in the world by 2020. And it's true that the number of people with college degrees is rising, but it's also true that it's not rising quickly enough. Since the President first announced the 2020 goal in 2009, the nation has made progress in boosting attainment. Over 43% of our 25 to 34-year-olds have an associate's degree or higher. That's an increase of 2 percentage points since 2009. And that means an additional 1.3 million adults now have college degrees in America than at the start of our administration. That's a good thing, and that's real progress, but it's not nearly fast enough. We need that kind of growth each year, every year, to hit that 2020 goal. While money is never the only answer, it's hard to boost completion when so many states are contributing fewer resources to higher education. You guys are living this reality every day. Even in states that boosted total higher education funding from 2008 to 2011, only a handful increased their funding per student. SHEEO's data shows that 26 states, just over half, increased their total higher education funding from 2008 to 2011. But for fiscal year 2012, 82% of states decreased higher education funding, 82%. At a time of rising enrollment, reducing funds or just holding the line on funding will cause a downward spiral that's difficult to turn around. Of those states that did not cut funding, SHEEO reported that just 4 states increased their funding per student. Some states saw funding decrease by as much as 20% per student, even when adding overall funding. That's not the way to invest in the future or to dramatically accelerate attainment. Disinvestment is not the strategy that other countries are choosing. In fact, quite the opposite. As your open letter to the President points out, state support in constant dollars per student was lower in 2011 than it has been for more than 2.5 decades. The result, as your letter says, is that financing in higher education is in disarray, since state governments have not funded enrollment growth in public higher education. Now, it's no secret today that states face a brutal budget climate. It's tremendously tough out there, and I don't for a second want to minimize those real challenges that states and governors and state legislators face. Every capable, hardworking, and responsible student, though, must be able to go to college. That's not a Democratic dream or a Republican dream. That's the American dream. In our country, we don't believe that higher education should be a luxury reserved for those few who can afford it. In America, as President Obama says, no one should go broke because they want to go to college. But when you start to ask the average household to spend 25%, 30%, even 40% of their income for college, you start pricing college out of the reach of the middle class. We also know that this is a question of priorities, of where state leaders choose to invest. One northeastern state, for example, ran a budget surplus of $1 billion, but still cut higher education by more than $20 million. That's not the way to make higher education a priority investment. It will come as no surprise that public universities and colleges are obviously raising tuition and net price to compensate for those state funding cutbacks. When that happens, at the same time that median household income is stagnant or declining, the middle class gets squeezed, and it gets squeezed hard. That's not good for the economic vitality of your states or for the country as a whole. And it's going to put hardworking families and students that are doing the right thing every single day at a big disadvantage in a knowledge-based economy. The long and short of all this is that state funding cuts in higher education and tuition increases are jeopardizing our ability to hit that 2020 goal. But these state-by-state charts and tables suggest one last message as well. Boosting attainment is not just about funding, as vital as that is to accelerating college completion. It's also about making smarter use of state dollars. There's considerable variation among states in making progress towards that 2020 goal. Several states are doing a better job of meeting those goals even in this tough economic time. Montana, for example, had one of the biggest increases in college attainment of any state last year. Montana used to lag the nation in attainment, and today it's actually above average. If it can continue its growth, Montana will comfortably meet its share of the 2020 goal. But it's also troubling to see that per-student funding levels are requiring families to pay more to attend state universities in Montana as well. The picture is similar in other states. Colorado had attainment rates 3 times the national average, but low investment in higher education and high prices compared to family income there could make it harder for students in the future to have access and ultimately complete college. At the same time, states that are currently leading the country in college attainment simply cannot become complacent. Massachusetts has the highest college attainment rate of any state, but that attainment rate was essentially unchanged, was stagnant from 2009 to 2010. With more than half of its young adults already holding a college degree, Massachusetts does not have as far to go as other states to hit that 2020 goal. But it still has to elevate its attainment rate if our nation's going to collectively get where we need to be. At the federal level, our administration has undertaken a number of transformational reforms to try and foster progress towards that 2020 mark. During the last 4 years, the federal government has funded the biggest increase in college age since the GI Bill, and Rahm talked about that. That investment, without going back to taxpayers for a nickel, is one of the accomplishments I'm most proud of. The number of Pell Grant recipients has gone from 6 million to about 9.6 million, a 50% increase. And just as encouraging, applications from low-income students with family incomes below $10,000 a year are increasing twice as fast today as the overall growth in applications. And we all know the best way to break cycles of poverty are to increase access to college. As you also know from day one, our administration has also given community colleges unprecedented attention and support. For far too long, we think community colleges were something of a neglected jewel in America's higher education system. Our wonderful undersecretary and my partner, Martha Canters, here is the first community college president. Give her a round of applause. She's the first community college president to serve as undersecretary, and that was not a coincidence. That was strategic. As you also know, Jill Biden, the first second lady in the White House, is also a community college professor. And even with all her other duties, she continues to teach every single day at Northern Virginia Community College and loves it. Together with the U.S. Department of Labor, our administration has launched a $2 billion competitive fund to help community colleges accelerate completion and develop programs tied to real workforce needs. The TAA Community College Training Initiative seeks to improve student retention and achievement rates. It aims to reduce time to completion, and it dramatically expands online and technology-enabled learning for high-wage, high-skill industries. And we're proud of that record, but the fact remains that the federal government still has a lot more work to do to hit that 2020 goal. And that's why we're looking to do more to incentivize college completion, innovation, and to boost quality and productivity in post-secondary education. Earlier this year, President Obama proposed an unprecedented $1 billion Race to the Top competition to promote college affordability and completion. This Race to the Top fund for higher ed would incentivize statewide efforts to improve quality and productivity while supporting state efforts to keep higher education affordable. To meet the 2020 goal, colleges and universities must make it easier for parents and students to finance their college education and understand their financial obligations. And meeting that challenge requires much greater transparency as well. As you know, our administration has undertaken a series of initiatives to increase transparency and to reduce student debt. And I won't go through all those initiatives with you here, but I will say that I've talked with far too many students, frankly, who have told me that the first time they understood how much loan debt they actually had was after that first bill arrived. That's crazy, it's costly, and it's absolutely avoidable. There are more than 7,000 institutions of higher education in America. We have the best system of higher education in the world, bar none. But today, and historically, each one had its own financial aid award letter. Some of those letters are good, others are confusing or even misleading. But there's absolutely no reason that financial aid award letters should be mysterious. And there's absolutely no reason that prospective students should forego college because they mistakenly think that they can't afford it. And that's why our department has proposed a new, easy-to-use shopping sheet or model financial aid award letter that would standardize basic information for parents and students in an easy-to-understand manner. And I've written to every college president in America and encouraged them to adopt that college shopping sheet. And many already have, and I thank them for their leadership. I want to stress that adopting this form is absolutely voluntary, but this new award letter is a tool that institutions can use to hold themselves to a higher standard of transparency at little or frankly no additional cost. These initiatives to increase transparency, to boost productivity, and encourage innovation and technology-based learning are all important because major expansions of federal aid simply won't continue indefinitely. Today, frankly, far too many folks in Congress think of education as an expense rather than the investment that we all know it is. I'm also deeply concerned about the potential for sequestration to jeopardize our nation's ability to develop the best educated, skilled workforce in the world. If Congress imposes sequestration at the start of 2013, our department would be required to slash spending on contracts to support the processing and origination of student loans. That could cause delays and will hurt students as they try and make decisions about where to go to school. And it could reduce services for borrowers seeking to repay their loans. Work-study programs would be slashed. So too would SHEEO and so many other grant programs. Imposing automatic budget cuts is absolutely the wrong way to make tough budget choices. We're playing chicken with the lives of American students, and we simply can't afford to do that. For all these reasons, the imperative to develop the best educated workforce in the world is in jeopardy today. And just as the federal government has to do more to hit that 2020 goal, states and institutions of higher education will need to meet us halfway in doing more to keep college costs down and to boost completion rates. Despite today's tough budget crunch, I'm actually optimistic that states and institutions can take important steps towards hitting that goal. And I'm optimistic because, away from the dysfunction we sometimes see in Washington, states themselves are leading the way and thinking creatively about new ways to promote college completion and affordability. And there's so many statewide examples of new and innovative initiatives now taking hold all across the country. Missouri has announced a plan to offer $10 million in innovation campus grants to public colleges and universities to develop accelerated 3-year tracks for some undergraduate degrees. New Jersey has passed legislation that established credit for prior learning centers that will certify different types of prior learning as college credit worthy, like stable apprenticeship programs or military experience to help our veterans. In Wisconsin, the University of Wisconsin system is also providing college credit for prior learning experience in the hopes of enrolling more non-traditional adult students. We know we have 93 million out there. And in Washington State, the State Board for Community and Technical Colleges is at the vanguard of the open educational resources movement that's so important. It launched the Open Course Library late last year. It's a collection of high-quality educational materials for 42 of the state's courses with the highest enrollment rates. It includes textbooks, syllabi, readings, and assessments, and it costs $30 or less per student. The course materials are available for free, online, anywhere in the world. Other states are taking on the challenges of boosting college and career readiness by reforming and reducing the need for remedial instruction. New legislation in Florida has established common placement testing for public post-secondary education. It requires that 12th grade students complete appropriate remedial instruction before they graduate from high school. Virginia's community college system is also redesigning remedial education for all of its 23 colleges. Their goal is to increase the number of community college students who complete a degree by 50%. And today, they're already halfway towards hitting that goal. Other states, right here in Illinois, Arkansas, and Michigan, have all instituted performance-based funding schemes that tie funding in part to common sense metrics like graduation rates, course completion, and constrain the growth of tuition at public institutions. And these are just some, just a handful of the remarkable examples of states that have refused to throw their hands up in the face of tough budget cuts and state funding for higher education. We know states are being penny wise but pound foolish when they cut state funding for higher education. States that continue to disinvest in higher education are not going to hit their 2020 goals, and they'll have a harder time attracting and retaining industry in their states. But I'm inspired by so many examples of state leaders who are responding to funding cutbacks by making smarter use of scarce dollars. And as I said at the start of my remarks, the goal of having the best educated workforce in the world is a shared goal, and it must be a shared responsibility. Working together with your commitment and your hard work, I absolutely believe we can reach that ambitious goal by the end of the decade. The need to dramatically elevate college attainment is an urgent one for our students, for our families, for our communities, our states, and our country. Thank you for your tremendous hard work and creativity in these difficult economic times. And please challenge me and my team to be great partners as we move forward together. I'll stop there. Thank you so much and look forward to having a great conversation with you. Thanks for having me this morning.